There's a strange thing that happens to people right after they start earning more money. Instead of feeling more secure, they somehow feel just as stretched as before, sometimes even more so. And if you look closely, the reason isn't bad luck or the economy. The reason is something most people celebrate. It's the upgrade. We've been taught to treat upgrades as milestones. A nicer car, a bigger apartment, premium subscriptions, business class seats, designer labels. These things feel like proof that you've made it. But what if some of those upgrades are actually working against you in ways that are almost impossible to notice until significant damage has already been done? That's exactly what we're going to unpack today, because the most financially dangerous moves aren't always the obvious ones. Sometimes they come wrapped in leather seats and a panoramic sunroof. Let's start with something called the baseline shift. Every time you upgrade your lifestyle in a meaningful way, your brain quietly resets what it considers normal. Before the upgrade, your old standard of living felt perfectly fine. You were comfortable, you were managing, and you had a certain level of contentment. But after the upgrade, that previous version of your life starts to feel inadequate. Not because anything about it actually got worse, but because your internal reference point moved. This is one of the most underappreciated psychological mechanisms in personal finance, and it operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness. Think about it this way. Imagine you've been perfectly happy cooking at home most nights, eating out once or twice a week as a treat. Then you go through a period where your income rises and suddenly you're dining at nicer restaurants 4 or 5 times a week. That becomes your new routine, your new normal. A few months later, your situation changes slightly, or you try to pull back on spending. Cooking at home no longer feels like a neutral choice. It starts to feel like a sacrifice. You haven't lost anything tangible, but psychologically you've stepped down. And that feeling of stepping down carries a very real emotional cost that many people simply aren't willing to tolerate. So instead of adjusting, they keep spending. They protect the upgraded lifestyle at the expense of their financial health. This is what makes lifestyle inflation so quietly destructive. It doesn't feel like a financial mistake. It feels like maintaining your standard of living. And in the moment, those are almost indistinguishable from each other. Now here's where it gets more interesting. Most people think of financial freedom as something that grows proportionally with income. Earn more, have more freedom. That's the intuitive assumption. But that's only true if your expenses stay relatively stable as your income grows. The moment your spending grows at the same rate as your income, or even faster, you've essentially trapped yourself at a higher cost of living without gaining any additional freedom. Your life looks more successful from the outside, but your actual margin, the gap between what you earn and what you need to survive, stays the same or shrinks. And that margin is freedom. That gap is the thing that gives you options. A person earning a modest income but living well below their means has something incredibly valuable: flexibility. They can take a lower-paying job they love. They can weather a financial storm without panic. They can say no to opportunities that don't align with their values because they're not desperate. Compare that to someone earning 3 times as much, but whose lifestyle has expanded to consume nearly every dollar. On paper, the second person looks wealthier. In reality, they're just as trapped as someone making a fraction of their salary, sometimes more so, because their obligations are larger and their lifestyle is harder to walk back. There's a specific pattern worth examining here, because it shows up across income levels and demographics. It usually starts small. Someone gets a raise, and they upgrade one thing, maybe a gym membership or a slightly nicer grocery store. Completely reasonable. Then another raise comes, and another small upgrade follows. A lease on a better car. A move to a nicer neighborhood. Little by little, each individual upgrade seems justified, even sensible. But cumulatively, they've engineered a life that costs significantly more to maintain than the one they started with, without any meaningful increase in actual happiness or security. In behavioral economics, this layering of small, justifiable upgrades that accumulate into a much higher cost baseline is one of the core patterns behind long-term wealth stagnation in otherwise high-earning individuals. Let's talk about cars for a moment, because vehicles are one of the clearest examples of how an upgrade can quietly work against your long-term interests. A car is rarely just a purchase. When someone upgrades from a practical vehicle to a luxury model, the price of the car is only the beginning. Insurance premiums go up. Maintenance costs increase dramatically, especially for European or performance brands. The depreciation curve is steeper. And perhaps most significantly, the psychological pull to keep upgrading strengthens. Because now that you own a luxury car, a standard vehicle feels like a downgrade. You've reset your baseline again. And so 5 years later, when it's time for a new car, the non-luxury option doesn't feel like a real choice anymore. The upgrade created a new floor. Housing works the same way, and often at a much larger scale. Moving into a more expensive home doesn't just increase your mortgage or rent. It typically upgrades your entire surrounding context. The neighbors have nicer things. The social expectations in the area subtly shift. The furniture that looked great in your previous place suddenly looks out of place. So you upgrade the furniture, then the kitchen appliances, then the landscaping. The house itself creates a gravitational pull toward more spending, simply by changing the environment you're operating in. None of this is inevitable, but it's far more common than most people realize because it happens so gradually. There's also the social dimension of lifestyle upgrades that rarely gets enough attention. Human beings are deeply social creatures, and we calibrate our behavior significantly based on the people around us. When you upgrade your lifestyle, you often shift social circles, or at least social contexts. And those new environments come with their own unspoken financial norms. The friend group that takes annual international trips, the colleagues who lunch at upscale spots, the neighborhood parents who send their kids to particular summer programs. Participating in these social environments isn't free, and opting out often carries a social cost that many people find genuinely uncomfortable. So spending accelerates not just because of personal preference, but because of social belonging, which is one of the most powerful human drives there is. This is why lifestyle inflation is so hard to address through willpower alone. It's not simply a matter of wanting things you shouldn't want. It's about how your entire environment, social network, and psychological baseline have restructured themselves around a more expensive way of living. To reverse course, you'd have to swim against very strong currents simultaneously. That's why the most effective strategy isn't about having more discipline. It's about being intentional before the baseline shifts. It's about pausing before an upgrade and asking a specific question. If I take on this new expense permanently, what does that cost me in terms of long-term options? Because that's the real currency at stake. Not dollars in isolation, but options. Every recurring lifestyle expense you commit to is a portion of your future income that is already spoken for. And over a career spanning decades, the compounding cost of those commitments is enormous. Money that could have built a meaningful investment position, funded a business idea, provided a cushion during career transitions, or simply given you the freedom to make choices from strength rather than necessity. That money got redirected into maintaining a lifestyle that, by the time you're living it, barely even feels special anymore. That's the cruelest part of this cycle. The things we upgrade to don't stay exciting. They normalize. And then we're paying premium prices for ordinary feeling experiences, just at a higher price point. Let me offer a reframe that might be useful here. Instead of thinking about upgrades in terms of what they add to your life, try thinking about them in terms of what they cost you in freedom units. A freedom unit is any amount of money that, if retained and managed thoughtfully, would give you one more degree of flexibility somewhere in your life. It could mean one more month of runway if you ever need to leave a job. It could mean 1 year earlier retirement, or one less year in a role you've outgrown. When you look at lifestyle upgrades through this lens, the calculus changes. It's no longer just about whether you can afford something. It's about what you're trading in terms of future autonomy. This framing also removes the moralistic weight that personal finance conversations often carry. It's not about being frugal or denying yourself things. It's about understanding the full picture of what a choice costs, not just the sticker price, but the opportunity cost, the baseline shift, the recurring commitment, and the compounding effect over time. With that full picture visible, people tend to make very different choices. Not because they're being told no, but because they genuinely see the trade-off more clearly. Some upgrades genuinely are worth it. Not every improvement to your lifestyle is a trap. If something meaningfully and sustainably improves your quality of life, contributes to your health, your relationships, or your long-term productivity, and you're making that choice from a position of genuine financial stability, not to fill a gap or signal status, then it may absolutely be the right move. The goal isn't to live poorly. The goal is to be honest with yourself about what you're actually buying, and what you're actually trading in exchange. The problem is that most lifestyle upgrades get purchased on autopilot, driven by the feeling that this is just what people do when they earn more. There's an invisible social script that says success looks a certain way, and so you spend money chasing that appearance of success, sometimes at the direct expense of the actual thing. Because real financial success isn't about what your life looks like from the outside. It's about how much margin, how much choice, and how much stability you've built into the structure of your life below the surface. Start noticing the moments when you're about to upgrade something, not because it genuinely adds deep value to your life, but because it feels like the appropriate next step, because it signals something about who you've become, because stepping back would feel like failure. Those are the moments where the most important financial decisions actually get made, not during big, obvious purchases, but in the quiet, incremental choices that accumulate into an entire way of living. The version of success worth working toward isn't the one that looks most impressive. It's the one that gives you the most freedom to actually live on your own terms, make choices based on what matters to you, and ride out uncertainty without fear. That kind of success is built slowly, in the gap between what you earn and what you genuinely need. And the wider you keep that gap, the more powerful your position becomes over time. If this video gave you a new way to think about how you approach spending and lifestyle decisions, the best thing you can do right now is share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know how you think about lifestyle upgrades in your own life, and whether this framing changes anything for you. If you're not subscribed yet, now is a great time to do that, because we cover these kinds of topics regularly. The ideas behind money, behavior, and long-term thinking that most people don't talk about until it's too late. See you in the next one.